The classroom had always been my sanctuary, a place where the weight of the world disappeared, replaced by the soft murmurs of students scribbling notes, the occasional burst of laughter and the rustle of turning pages. But ever since Arham stepped into my class, something had changed. He wasn't like the other students, sharp mind, quick wit, but a storm brewing inside. I noticed him early on, sitting at the back, detached yet observant. He rarely spoke unless spoken to, and even then, his words carried a weight that made the other students uneasy. His eyes held something dark, something unreadable. At first it was subtle, a missed homework assignment here, a sarcastic remark there, things I had seen countless times before. But then the signs became impossible to ignore. One day, a student approached me after class, hesitating before whispering, "Sir, Arham, he's been acting weird lately. He got into a fight last week. It was bad." Fights weren't uncommon, but there was something in her voice that sent a chill down my spine. I decided to keep an eye on him. Days passed, and the tension around Arham only grew. His presence felt heavier, his silence louder. There were moments, fleeting but real, where I caught him staring, a smirk playing on his lips like he knew something I didn't. And then came the test, the moment that changed everything. It was a routine class assessment. I walked between the rows, watching the students scribble in concentration. But when I reached Arham's desk, something caught my eye, a small piece of paper tucked under his sleeve. "Arham," I said, my voice calm but firm, "hand it over." He didn't move. The entire class had gone still, watching, waiting. I reached for the paper myself, but before I could, he slapped it onto the desk, pushing it toward me with a smirk. "Here you go, sir. Happy now?" A cold shiver ran through me. His voice wasn't angry, it was taunting, challenging. I took the paper and saw what I had expected. Answers. He had been cheating. "See me after class," I said, my voice harder now. But before I turned away, he leaned in slightly and whispered, just loud enough for me to hear, "You'll regret this, sir." It wasn't a threat. Not exactly. But there was something about the way he said it, something in his voice that sent a ripple of unease through me. The class ended. He didn't stay behind, and that should have been my first warning. I should have reported him immediately. Should have spoken to someone. Should have done something, but I didn't. Instead, I brushed it off as a moment of teenage defiance, biggest mistake of my life. The classroom had never been this silent before. It wasn't the comfortable hush of focused students working on an assignment. It was the kind of silence that presses against your chest, tight and suffocating. Arham stood in the middle of the room, his chair knocked over behind him. His fists clenched, jaw tight, eyes locked onto mine. The same smirk he had given me during the test was gone. Now there was only rage, cold, simmering rage. I took a slow breath, keeping my voice steady. "Arham, sit down." He didn't move. His stare was unblinking, his hands trembled slightly, not with fear, but with restraint. The other students didn't dare speak. A few had already inched toward the back of the room, their bodies tensed like they were ready to run. Others sat frozen in their seats, wide-eyed, watching, waiting. Then he spoke. "You think you can humiliate me and get away with it?" My heart pounded. The way he said it, slow, deliberate, like he was tasting every word before spitting it out, sent a cold shiver down my spine. I forced myself to stay calm. I couldn't show fear. "No one humiliated you, Arham," I said evenly. "Sit down, let's talk." He let out a bitter laugh, shaking his head. Then he reached into his bag. "I swear." At that moment, time stopped. A sharp gasp came from somewhere in the room. A girl in the front row pressed her hands to her mouth, eyes wide with terror. Another student closest to the door was already reaching for the handle. I felt my stomach drop. Was this it? Had I pushed him too far? My hands instinctively twitched toward my desk, toward my phone, toward anything I could use. My mind raced through 1,000 possibilities in a single breath. Then, Arham pulled something out and slammed it onto the desk, a thick, crumpled stack of papers. I blinked. My pulse was still hammering in my ears. "Read it!" His voice was raw, shaking. For a second, I just stood there, unsure of what was happening. Then, slowly, I reached for the papers and unfolded them. My breath caught in my throat. It wasn't a threat, it wasn't an attack. It was a letter, a confession. Dozens of pages filled with messy, angry handwriting. Rants, stories, pain. The words blurred together as I scanned them. About his home, his father, the nights he spent awake listening to things a child never should. He wasn't here to hurt me. He was here to be heard. And I had almost missed it. But just as relief started to settle in, just as I thought it was over, he said something that shook me to my core. "You were my last chance, sir." And then he turned and walked out. The door slammed behind Arham, leaving behind an unbearable silence. No one moved. No one breathed. It felt as if the entire classroom had frozen in time, trapped in the echo of his last words. "You were my last chance, sir." My fingers tightened around the stack of papers he had left behind. My eyes skimmed over the ink-stained confessions, the jagged words filled with rage, pain, and something deeper, desperation. Then the whispers began. What just happened? Was he going to, Did Sir know about this? The murmurs swirled around me, growing louder until one student, Aisha, usually quiet, usually reserved, stood up and blurted, "Sir, do something! He looked like he was going to..." I didn't let her finish. I was already moving. I rushed out of the classroom, my heart pounding, my mind spinning with worst-case scenarios. The hallway stretched endlessly before me, and for the first time in my career, the school, the place I had always felt in control, felt unfamiliar, cold, like a place where something terrible could happen. I spotted a figure ahead, Arham. He was walking toward the main gate, his shoulders hunched, his steps slow and heavy, defeated. "Arham!" I called out, my voice urgent. He paused. For a moment, I thought he would turn around. I thought he would say something, anything, but he didn't. He simply shook his head and kept walking. By the time I reached the gate, he was gone. Months had passed, but the echoes of that day never truly left. The classroom wasn't the same. Or maybe I wasn't. I still caught myself glancing toward the seat Arham used to occupy, expecting to see him sitting there, his sharp eyes scanning the room, always watching, always calculating. But the chair remained empty, a silent reminder of the student I had lost. After that day, the school had done what schools do best, moved on. His name faded from conversations, his presence erased from the attendance register, his story nothing more than a passing whisper in the corridors. But I couldn't forget. I had tried to reach out. I called his parents once. His mother picked up. Her voice was tired, hollow. "He's gone," she said simply. "Gone?" My breath caught in my throat. "Where?" She hesitated. Then, in a voice so quiet it almost didn't exist, she whispered, "I wish I knew." And just like that, he was a ghost, vanished from my life, from the school, from the system that had failed him. But fate wasn't done with me yet. One evening, long after school had ended, I found myself sitting at my desk, the classroom bathed in the dim glow of the setting sun. I was exhausted, drained, haunted. Then a knock at the door, software hesitant. I turned, expecting a student, a janitor, anyone but him. But there he was, Arham, thinner, paler, a shadow of the boy I once knew. I stood up too quickly, my chair scraping against the floor. "Arham!" He held up a hand. "I don't have much time." I froze. His voice, flat, emotionless, was nothing like the Arham I remembered. What had happened to him? He reached into his pocket, pulled out a crumpled piece of paper, and placed it on my desk. "I just wanted to say..." He hesitated, then exhaled sharply. "You were the only one who ever noticed." And before I could respond, before I could ask anything, he turned and walked away. This time I didn't let him go. I rushed to the door, yanked it open, but the hallway was empty, like he had never been there at all. Hands shaking, I unfolded the paper he had left behind. It wasn't a confession this time. It was a thank you. Tears blurred my vision as I sank into my chair, my grip tightening around the note. I had spent months drowning in guilt, believing I had failed him. But maybe, just maybe, I had saved him in a way neither of us could fully understand. Sometimes the students we fail are the ones who needed us the most.